kind of scale of response was needed.
Are you still claiming, David Lammy, that the official death toll is, quote, far, far too low?
Andrew, I never claimed. What I sought to do and continue to seek to do is speak for many of the victims and survivors, many of whom I know, and you know I lost a friend. And it came up last night. People watched people jumping out of windows. People knew their neighbours in this very tight-knit community, and they don't recognise the number of 80. And so there is a...
But the police have confirmed that that's the number now.
Well, I think they've said that they think the number will rest at 80, but they've also said there are these 23 homes that they're unsure about.
Correct.
And it's going to take them many, many months to work out who was in the building.
But you talked about suspicions of a cover-up. The police, I would take it, in this situation, they're not part of a cover-up.
You're asking me a question I can't answer.
Why would the police cover
No, what I've
up?
said, and I'm absolutely clear of this, you're not going to blow me off it, is there have been situations like this in the past. Hillsborough's the one that we all remember most recently, and the truth has taken 30 years to come out. And I'm afraid many of the folk down there, and that is me included, are worried. And therefore my job as an elected backbencher in the Labour Party is to be extra vigilant, extra cautious.
But again, you have said the official death toll is, quote, far, far too low. You have no evidence for that.
Well, my evidence is something you don't have, Andrew, because I suspect you haven't spoken to as many victims and survivors as I do.
But with respect, that is not evidence.
Well,
that is not evidence. Their
I think
fears...
testimony of people who live in the block is pretty good evidence.
No, I'm sorry, it's not.
It could be evidence in a court of law.
No, because they have no evidence. Well,
What?
we need evidence to show that the official death toll is far, far too low. And you don't have that.
Well,
and even the victims don't have it. The victims have their suspicions. I understand that. The victims are right to be suspicious.
Andrew, it's not about what David Lammy thinks. Have you had Cressida Dick on the show and asked her that very question?
Well, the police have told her. The police have told... We've had Cressida Dick on the BBC.
Have you asked her that question?
And the police have said, we think it's about 80. The police have answered the question.
I have not seen
Cressida Dick ask that question. Do you have evidence that the official death toll is far, far too low? Because you've stated that. Do you have evidence to back it up?
Andrew, as a backbencher, I've said I've spoken to survivors and victims. You have not put that question to the person in charge. Don't put that question to me.
No, I'm sorry. you cannot make official statements like this unless you have the evidence. Instead, otherwise, you're just playing politics with a really difficult, tragic situation.
Andrew, I resent the suggestion I'm playing politics when I have a friend that's died. And I'm concerned that the BBC, your show, has not put the question to the person in charge, puts the question to me when I'm speaking on behalf of victims.
The BBC has interviewed Cressida Dick. Don't make claims that are untrue.
I have seen no interviews with Cressida Dick on this issue where she has talked about numbers, Andrew.
All right.
So you've got that wrong.
You need to watch TV a bit more.
You've got that wrong,
At least you're on the show
You've got it wrong. You've got it wrong. You've got it wrong.
You saying I've got it wrong does not make you right.
And you saying I haven't got evidence does not make you right. It doesn't make you right.
Once again, you are playing politics.
I am not playing politics, and I resent the suggestion about a tragedy in which I lost a friend. Andrew, I lost a friend.
I know, and that's tragic, but it doesn't mean you get to play politics with it.
I'm not playing politics, Andrew.
The viewers will make up their
think
minds.
That's cheap. It's very cheap.
The viewers will make up their minds.
Very cheap.
I've seen 9/11 is that example. And yet, this is what we're bringing into Grenfell.
It seems to me that it's helping to muddy the waters. But let's turn to the BBC, and I found this an extremely unpleasant interview. This is Mr. Lammy, and Neil, sorry, with that his name goes out of my head, Andrew Neil, yeah, we got there in the end, did the interview. So Mr. Lammy's saying that he was deeply upset by what had happened, apart from anything else, because he'd lost a friend in the building. But he was also saying he'd spent a lot of time talking to survivors, and he was very interested in what those survivors had to say to him, including that they were saying that they watched people jumping out of windows, And particularly, they did not recognise the official figure that was being given of 80 deaths at the moment. If we just follow through what was said, and then we can talk about it. But essentially, David Lammy said this: residents are suspicious over the official death toll. There have been instances in the past, Hillsborough, for example, where the authorities have not told the truth, and the truth has taken nearly 30 years to come out. And nobody can argue with that. We now have evidence to show that where necessary, the British government and local authorities will lie to cover up large crime scenes. So that's what he had to say. And he was talking with passion, reasonable passion and emotion, because, as he said, he'd been spending time with the survivors. And then here's Andrew Neil, and he was just outrageous. The fact that residents had said anything, according to this man, was not evidence.
This is
so
yes, victim, first-hand victim testimony
is not evidence.
Is not evidence.
No. So at one point, Mr. Lammy said, well, actually, if you were running a court, you'd want to know what people said. No, this is not evidence, said Neil. We need evidence to show that the official death toll is far too low, and even the victims don't have it. So the arrogance here was just unbelievable. And then eventually he got into a accusatory mantra of "you are playing politics" was all he kept saying to this man. This some people have described it as a car crash interview, but I found it obscene.
Yeah, I think obscene is the right word. This "you are playing politics, you are playing politics." There's been a lot of playing politics over Grenfell. There has, but this was not it. This was a representative from the local community doing exactly what he should do, which is talking and listening to the local community and bringing what they are saying to a wider audience. This was not playing politics. This was a man doing his job. And he was rounded on by Andrew Neil, who basically accused him of anything he could to silence the view that was being put forward that the 80 figure might be dodgy. Raising a question over that, saying that the people on the ground cannot accept this figure because it just doesn't tally with their experience of who lived in that block.
Yeah.
That information must not be allowed, it would seem, to be broadcast.
According to the BBC.
Without being immediately rounded on and condemned as some sort of political game, which it's clearly not.
Yeah. So let's remind ourselves that Andrew Neil did feature in the recent pay release from the BBC. So the BBC's published details of this is Andrew Neil himself saying this. The BBC has published details of on-screen talent, which you may be surprised to know includes me as on-screen talent. And apparently he's in the £200,000 to £249,999 bracket. So vast amounts of money paid for this man to be unbelievably rude and condescending to an elected member of parliament who had taken the trouble to go and talk to survivors. And one of Lammy's points was, of course, to Andrew Neil, have you actually been there to talk to survivors? But Neil didn't want to answer that question.
Indeed not.